All right, so welcome to this deep dive. We are going to be exploring Frank Herbert's Dune.
Oh, exciting.
It is, and specifically, its take on the savior myth.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. We've got two super interesting essays that we're going to
Yeah.
be pulling from. And we're going to unpack how Dune challenges,
Okay.
like the classic hero's journey,
Mhm.
and what that tells us about power, faith, and even manipulation.
It's fascinating, how deeply ingrained the savior myth is, I think, in all of us,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
when things are tough. Like we yearn for that hero to
Wow.
just like swoop in and fix everything.
Totally.
And Dune really forces us to question that yearning
Yeah.
and to see how that desire can be exploited.
It makes you wonder if we're almost programmed to
Yeah.
look for saviors,
Yeah.
and if that makes us vulnerable to manipulation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where Dune gets really interesting, I think. It's not just a space opera, right? It's
Oh.
like it's a reflection of our own world
Mm-hmm.
and how we create and follow leaders,
Yeah,
sometimes to our detriment.
for sure. So let's talk about Paul Atreides.
Yeah.
So at first glance, he just seems like your classic chosen one,
Mhm.
destined for greatness, right? He's the Kwisatz Haderach,
He is.
a super being
Yeah.
that the Bene Gesserit, this powerful sisterhood, has
Mm.
been trying to engineer for
For
generations.
generations, yeah.
But here's the twist. Paul wasn't supposed to happen.
That's right.
His mother, Lady Jessica, who is a Bene Gesserit herself,
Yeah.
disobeys orders and has a son instead of a daughter,
Oh, wow.
throwing their whole plan off track.
That's right.
It's almost like fate intervened, right?
Yeah.
This seemingly insignificant act sets off this chain reaction
Yeah.
that leads to Paul's rise.
And that's where the tragedy of Paul begins to unfold, because
Right.
even though he's got these incredible powers,
Right.
he is also burdened with this terrifying awareness of the future.
Remember that scene where he undergoes the spice agony,
Yeah.
drinking the water of life? And he sees visions of this horrific jihad, a holy war, being waged in his name.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
He even says, "I cannot choose the lesser evil."
Oh, that quote gets me every time.
Yeah, yeah. I cannot choose the lesser evil. It gets to the core of the savior myth, I think, don't you?
I think so.
It reveals the burden of impossible choices,
Right.
the weight of knowing that no matter what you do,
Mm.
there will be suffering.
It makes you think about leaders in our own world
Oh, yeah.
and the kinds of choices that they have to make. Do you think they ever feel that same sense of being trapped,
Oh, for sure.
of having to choose between bad and worse?
I'd say that's a universal experience for anyone in a position of power.
Okay.
And it's something that Herbert explores so well in Dune.
Mm-hmm.
Paul isn't like some naive hero.
Right.
He knows what's coming. He knows the Fremen, the desert people of Arrakis,
Yeah.
have this prophecy about a Messiah who
Yeah.
will lead them to freedom.
And he knows the Bene Gesserit planted that prophecy.
He does, yeah.
They've been manipulating cultures for centuries,
Well,
using religion and superstition
Oh,
as tools of control.
as tools.
Yeah, they call it the missionaria protectiva,
Right.
which is like it's like a long con where they're seeding these myths
Yeah, they're setting the stage.
to pacify populations
Right.
and prepare them for a leader they can control.
Exactly. It's chilling.
It is.
It's a chilling example of how belief systems can be engineered.
Yeah.
And Paul, whether he likes it or not, becomes the pawn in this game.
It's like he's walking into a trap that's
Yeah.
been set for generations.
It has, yeah.
And he knows it, but he also feels this pull,
Realize he does.
this responsibility to
Right.
help the Fremen. It's such a complex situation,
Oh, it is.
full of moral ambiguity.
And this is where Dune really starts to challenge our assumptions about heroes.
Yeah.
I think Paul isn't like simply good or evil. He's a product of circumstance,
Yeah.
driven by forces both within and beyond his control.
It reminds me of that saying,
What's that?
the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Oh, yeah.
You know, even if he starts out wanting to do the right thing,
Mm,
the very nature of the savior myth
right.
seems to corrupt even the best of intentions.
Yeah, yeah. Herbert's showing us that power, even when wielded with the best intentions, can have, unintended and often devastating consequences.
So we've got this hero who's trapped by prophecy,
Right.
a group of powerful women pulling the strings,
Or, yeah.
and a planet full of people desperate for a savior.
Yeah.
And we're only just scratching the surface of what Dune has to say about all of this.
There's so much more to explore here. We haven't even touched on, the ecological and political implications of the spice.
Right.
The substance that makes interstellar travel possible and makes Arrakis the most valuable planet in the universe.
Right. It's amazing how Herbert weaves together all these different themes like religion, politics, ecology, human nature into this epic story that feels, I don't know, just as relevant today as it did when it was first published.
Absolutely. And that's why Dune continues to resonate with readers, I think, decades later. It speaks to something deep within us.
Yeah.
This longing for meaning, for purpose, for someone to lead us through the darkness.
But it also warns us about the dangers of blind faith, the seductive nature of power, and the unintended consequences of our actions, right?
It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
It is a reminder that the solutions we seek are rarely as simple as we'd like them to be.
Okay, so before we dive further into those complexities, let's take a closer look at the Bene Gesserit and their role in shaping the events of Dune.
Their manipulation of belief systems is a masterclass in how power can operate behind the scenes.
Totally.
Subtly influencing events to achieve its own ends.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of what we believe is truly our own and how much has been shaped by forces we're not even aware of.
That's a question we all have to grapple with, especially in a world where information is so readily available and easily manipulated.
But let's unpack that further in the next part of our deep dive. We'll delve deeper into the Bene Gesserit's methods, explore the psychology of belief, and discuss how we can develop the critical thinking skills necessary to navigate a world full of competing narratives.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so we've talked about how the Bene Gesserit manipulate these belief systems.
Right.
But I'm curious, why go through all that trouble? Why not just seize power directly?
Well, that's where their strategy gets really interesting.
Okay.
They understand that brute force is rarely sustainable. True power, lasting power, lies in controlling the narrative.
Okay.
In shaping how people think and what they believe.
So it's about influence rather than domination.
Yeah.
Okay.
By planting these myths and prophecies, they're essentially setting the stage, creating a context where someone like Paul is almost guaranteed to rise to power.
It's like they're playing a long game.
They are.
A game of chess where they're thinking several moves ahead.
Yeah, and it's a game they've been playing for centuries.
Wow.
Think about it this way.
Okay.
The Fremen have been living on Arrakis for generations. Adapting to its harsh environment, developing their unique culture and belief system.
Right.
And the Bene Gesserit, with their Missionaria Protectiva, have been subtly influencing that culture, weaving their prophecies into the fabric of Fremen society.
So when Paul arrives, he's not just some random outsider. He fits perfectly into their pre-existing narrative.
That's right.
He's the fulfillment of their hopes and dreams, the answer to their prayers.
And that makes him incredibly powerful because he's not just leading them through, force or fear. He's leading them through their faith, their deepest beliefs.
But isn't that kind of terrifying? The idea that our beliefs can be so easily manipulated that we can be led to do things we wouldn't otherwise do just because we believe in something.
That's the power and the danger of belief systems.
Right.
They can unite us, inspire us, drive us to achieve great things.
Right.
But they can also be used to control us, to manipulate us,
Yeah.
to lead us down dangerous paths.
So I guess that's why it's so important to be like aware of our own biases, to question our beliefs, to make sure we're not just blindly following someone else's narrative.
Absolutely. We need to develop that critical thinking muscle,
Okay.
that ability to step back and ask, why do I believe this? What evidence supports this belief?
Right.
Who benefits from me believing this?
It sounds like a lot of work.
I mean, I guess it can be.
Like, isn't it easier to just like go with the flow?
Yeah.
To believe what we're told?
It might seem easier in the short term.
Yeah.
But in the long run, it can lead to, a lot of pain and suffering.
Right.
History is full of examples of people being led astray.
Yeah.
By charismatic leaders and seductive ideologies.
You mentioned historical revolutions earlier.
Yes.
Do you think the savior myth played a role in how those movements unfolded?
Oh, I think so.
Like, could things have gone differently if people had been more skeptical, more willing to question the narratives they were being told?
It's it's hard to say for sure, but I think it's definitely worth considering.
Okay.
Take the French Revolution, for example.
Okay.
It started with noble goals: liberty, equality, fraternity.
Right.
But it quickly descended into violence and chaos,
Yeah.
with those in power becoming just as oppressive
Right.
as the regime they overthrew.
And isn't that a common pattern throughout history? Like revolutions that start with the best intentions
Right.
often end up creating the very systems they were fighting against.
I think that's because the savior myth often sets unrealistic expectations.
Okay.
It promises quick and easy solutions to complex problems.
Mm-hmm.
And when those solutions don't materialize,
Right.
people become disillusioned, angry,
Yeah.
and vulnerable to even more extreme ideologies.
So how do we like break free from that cycle? How do we create lasting change without falling into the trap of the savior myth?
I think it starts with recognizing that there are no easy answers.
Okay.
Real change is slow, messy,
Yeah.
and often requires compromise.
Right.
It also requires us to be, actively engaged,
Mm-hmm.
to hold our leaders accountable,
Yeah.
and to be willing to challenge the status quo
Right.
even when it's uncomfortable.
It sounds like a lot of responsibility.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's a responsibility we all share.
Right.
We can't simply wait for a savior to come and fix everything.
Right.
We have to be the change we want to see in the world.
And maybe that's the ultimate lesson of Dune.
I think so.
It's not just a warning about the dangers of the savior myth. It's a call to action and an invitation to participate in shaping a better future.
It reminds us that we all have the power to make a difference,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's in, small, seemingly insignificant ways.
But before we get too carried away with that idea,
Okay.
I think it's important to remember that not all saviors are created equal.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Some saviors are genuine, driven by a sincere desire to help others,
Right.
but others are more manipulative, using their charisma and influence
Right.
to gain power and control.
So how do we tell the difference? How can we recognize the warning signs of a false savior?
Well, there are a few things to look out for.
Okay.
False saviors often present themselves as having all the answers,
Mhm.
promising quick and easy solutions to complex problems.
They tend to be very charismatic, right?
They do.
Like drawing people in with their charm and their ability to connect on an emotional level.
And they often demonize their opponents,
Yeah.
portraying them as evil or incompetent,
Right.
further reinforcing their own image as the only hope for salvation.
It sounds like they're using the same tactics as the Bene Gesserit, just on a smaller scale.
Exactly. They understand the power of narrative,
Mhm.
the importance of shaping how people perceive the world.
So it's about being aware of those tactics,
Well, right.
being able to see through the manipulation
Yeah.
and make informed decisions about who and what we believe in.
Right. And it's about recognizing that we all have a responsibility to be, critical thinkers,
Right.
to question authority,
Yeah.
and to challenge narratives that don't serve our best interests.
This has been really insightful.
Great.
But how does this all connect back to the listener? What can they take away from this?
I think that the most important takeaway is this.
Oh.
Be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers.
Okay.
Be skeptical of easy solutions.
Right.
And be willing to question even the most charismatic leaders.
Because true progress requires more than just blind faith.
That's right.
It requires critical thinking, active engagement, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths.
It's not always easy,
Right.
but it's the only way to create a world where we don't need saviors. A world where we can all be empowered to shape our own destiny.
That's a powerful message.
Thanks.
But before we wrap up,
Okay.
let's bring it back to Dune and talk about what happens when the savior myth actually plays out.
All right, let's delve into how Paul's rise to power unfolds.
Okay.
And what it tells us about the unintended consequences of the savior myth. Because even with good intentions,
Right.
the path to hell can be paved with, well, the rest.
So we left off talking about how even good intentions can kind of go off the rails when someone is put on a pedestal.
Yeah.
In Dune, we see how Paul Atreides' rise to power actually plays out.
Right.
And it's not pretty.
It's not always pretty.
It seems like a classic case of be careful what you wish for.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's fascinating how Herbert uses the setting of Arrakis itself
Yeah.
to kind of mirror this descent.
Mm.
You have this harsh desert planet
Right. Yeah.
where survival is a daily struggle. The Fremen people are tough, resilient,
Right.
but they're also desperate for a change,
Mm.
for someone to lead them to a better future.
And that desperation, that longing for a savior,
Yes.
it makes them vulnerable.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Paul, with his prescience, his understanding of their prophecies,
Mm.
he becomes the focal point for all those hopes and dreams.
And for a while, it seems like he's the answer, right?
He does.
He unites the Fremen tribes, leads them to victories against their oppressors.
Mm.
He even manages to control the production of spice,
Right.
this most valuable substance in the universe.
The most valuable, yes.
But that's where the cracks start to show, right?
That's where things start to unravel, yeah.
The very things that made Paul a powerful leader, his charisma, his connection to the Fremen prophecies,
Yeah.
they also become the seeds of his downfall.
Interesting, right.
It's almost like the savior myth itself is a kind of trap.
I think it is.
Once you step into that role,
Yeah.
you're bound to be corrupted by it.
And that's exactly what we see happen with Paul.
Yeah.
As his power grows,
Right.
so does his ego.
Mm-hmm.
He starts to believe his own hype,
Yeah.
He becomes more ruthless, more willing to sacrifice lives to achieve his goals.
It's like he loses sight of who he is, what he originally set out to do.
And the Fremen,
Right.
blinded by their faith in him,
Right.
are swept along in this tide of religious fervor.
Yeah.
What started as a fight for freedom
Right.
becomes a bloody jihad, a holy war
Yeah.
that spreads across the galaxy.
Millions die in Paul's name.
Yeah.
He becomes a tyrant, the very thing he swore to fight against.
That's right.
It's a tragic irony, isn't it?
Dude.
The savior becomes the destroyer.
And it all goes back to that fundamental flaw in the savior myth.
Okay.
The idea that one person can have all the answers,
Yeah.
that they can single-handedly fix everything.
It's like putting all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
If that basket breaks, everything goes with it.
Dune shows us that real change
Yeah.
doesn't happen through one charismatic leader,
Mm-hmm.
but through collective effort,
Right.
through people working together to solve problems.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging complexity,
Mm-hmm.
accepting that there are no easy answers,
Yeah.
and being willing to compromise.
So what can we learn from this?
Right, like how do we apply these lessons from Dune
Yeah.
to our own lives?
Right. I mean, we're not all leading galactic revolutions.
No, but we
Huh.
still encounter these savior narratives all the time.
We do. We do.
Think about a time when you felt drawn to a charismatic leader.
Okay.
What qualities made them appealing? Did you notice any potential downsides
Mm-hmm.
to their leadership style?
Maybe it was someone who promised to fix everything, who
Yeah.
had all the answers, or someone who made you feel like you were part of something bigger than yourself.
Right. Those are all hallmarks of the savior archetype.
Okay.
And while those qualities can be inspiring,
Yeah.
they can also be dangerous if we're not careful.
So what can we do to avoid falling into that trap? How can we be more discerning about who we follow and what we believe in?
I think it starts with being aware of our own biases. We all have a tendency to look for easy answers, to want someone to tell us what to do.
Especially in times of uncertainty. It's so tempting
Oh, yeah.
to cling to someone who seems strong and confident.
Exactly. But we need to resist that impulse.
Okay.
We need to develop a healthy skepticism,
Mm-hmm.
to question assumptions,
Yeah.
and to be willing to think for ourselves.
And that means being willing to engage with complexity,
Yes.
to accept that there are often multiple perspectives on any given issue.
It's also about being aware of the language that's being used.
Right.
Are there red flags that might make you, reconsider your support for a leader?
Right.
Are they using divisive language,
Mm-hmm.
making promises they can't keep,
Right.
or demonizing their opponents?
Those are all signs that you might be dealing with a false savior.
Yeah.
Someone who's more interested in power than in serving others.
And remember, true leadership is often found not in a single charismatic individual,
Right.
but in the collective efforts of many.
Okay.
It's about collaboration, compromise,
Yeah.
and a shared commitment to a common goal.
So if you find yourself drawn to a leader who seems, too good to be true,
Mm-hmm.
take a step back.
Yeah.
Ask yourself why you're drawn to them,
Yeah.
what they're offering, and what the potential downsides might be.
And don't be afraid to question their motives,
Mm.
to challenge their ideas, and to hold them accountable for their actions.
Because ultimately the responsibility for creating a better world lies not with a single savior,
I agree.
but with all of us.
All of us, yeah.
Dune shows us that the choices we make, the people we follow, the narratives we embrace, they all have consequences.
They do.
And those consequences can be far-reaching, shaping not only our own lives, but the lives of generations to come.
That's a powerful thought.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dune and the savior myth, we encourage you to continue exploring these themes.
Yeah, keep thinking about it.
Think about the leaders you admire.
Right.
Do they exhibit any of the traits we've discussed?
Yeah.
Are there any red flags that might make you reconsider your support?
Remember, true progress requires more than just blind faith.
That's right.
It requires critical thinking, active engagement, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths.
We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought, and until next time, keep diving deep.